More on the Volkswagen scandal. I'm joined by Tyson Slocum. He's director of the Public Citizen Energy Program. A lot of questions up on the Hill today, but one that stands out, why would one of the world's largest automakers go to such enormous lengths to basically cheat?
Because it's clear that their much touted diesel technology wasn't working as they hoped it would. Remember, beginning in the early to mid 2000s, Volkswagen put a lot of research and development into touting these high-powered, super clean diesel engines as the leading alternative fuel vehicle to compete with stronger air emission standards. They thought they could outcompete electric drivetrain vehicles. What's clear from the scandal is that what they thought they could do, create a high-performance, super clean diesel engine, they weren't able to do at a price point where they'd be able to sell cars into the market. And so at some point, they decided that they had to cheat, and so that they wouldn't back away from claiming their engines were high performance and clean, when in reality, obviously, they weren't. And I'm finding it very hard to believe, the head of Volkswagen North America said to Congress today, we think this was just a couple of programmers, essentially, that put this in there, and he said, I'm not sure why they did it. That's very hard to believe. We have to understand that this was the largest investment for the company into the clean tech space. And I find it very hard to believe that it was just a couple of software engineers that went rogue. They would have had to have coordinated with elements of the engine design and the emissions control system. And the fact that this diesel engine was the pride and joy of Volkswagen, it's very hard to believe that it was just some isolated software engineers.
Now, EPA officials were also grilled up on the Hill today. They said, why are you allowing these cars to stay on the road? Why are they?
Well, I mean, that's unclear why the recall hasn't been issued yet. I think the EPA is trying to work with Volkswagen and be reasonable. But it's clear that one of the lessons learned from this scandal is that the Environmental Protection Agency doesn't have all the resources they need to look over the shoulder of these auto companies, particularly if these auto companies are willing to go through such elaborate lengths to try and deceive regulators and consumers.
We don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you about Europe, because one of the things that's come through on this is there's been a lot of talk about the gun lobby here in the United States, how powerful they are. There's a lot of talk about how these European automakers have enormous power, and it's not just skirting the issues here. They're trying to water down the legislation in Europe. How tough is it to get this stuff through? I mean, you're out there fighting this on the front lines every day. I mean, how serious a problem is this?
Right. I mean, the automobile industry has a lot of sway in the United States. They have even more sway in Germany and in the European Union. And it's very clear that one of the lessons that Volkswagen and European governments and U.S. government has to learn from this is that we have to have much stronger oversight over the automobile industry. I don't think all the automakers are doing the kind of systemic fraud that Volkswagen was caught engaged in, but it's clear that we've got a very serious problem and that we need a much more robust enforcement to oversee the industry.
There was a Swedish researcher who found in 1998 that this was going on, thought that there would be some kind of legislation, some sort of stop to this, and obviously there wasn't. What are the takeaways, and do you think that enforcement's going to be much stronger going down the road a piece?
Enforcement has to be stronger. The big thing to me is, how is Volkswagen going to successfully navigate this without going bankrupt? At this point, its liabilities far exceed its ability to pay. We're looking at $18 billion alone in U.S. penalties for Clean Air Act violations for the 500,000 cars that didn't meet the standards. Volkswagen has said, we're not going to reimburse people for the cars that were sold. We're going to try and fix it. It's very unclear if they're going to be able to fix it. It's one thing to remove this bad software, but to make these cars high performance and clean, I don't see how Volkswagen can do it.
Tyson Slocum, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.